So if you're interested in the Appalachian Trail, you've probably watched like a bunch of different videos on like tips and hacks and gear and all this stuff. I mean, maybe you've even watched some of the videos that I've made like that. I'm here to say that you should throw all that stuff that you've learned into the garbage, just LeBron James that because this is what they never tell you about hiking the Appalachian Trail. So if you're gonna film a video about the Appalachian Trail, you should probably actually go to the Appalachian Trail to film it, right? Wrong. I'm actually not on the Appalachian Trail right now. I hate to say, I know, don't click off. I'm not on the Appalachian Trail. I'm actually on the Vermont Long Trail. I'm also constantly looking over my shoulder to make sure no one's like hiking up, because how weird would that be if I'm just standing here talking to my camera? Part of the Long Trail is actually the same trail as the Appalachian Trail. They coincide for the first 100 miles of the Long Trail down in southern Vermont. However, that's not the section that I'm on. But I figured like, hey, you know, it's close enough, right? They're both blazed in white. They're both like basically the same trail for all intents and purposes, right? Rug! In fact, I'm not even on the Long Trail right now. I just lied to you again. Hey. However, this one's a little bit less of a lie because the trail that I'm standing on right now used to be a part of the Long Trail and was for a very, very long time. And it was just a few years ago that they rerouted the Long Trail in order to eliminate a road walk by the Winooski River, which essentially ended up cutting off this section of trail right here, but they still left it open. They just turned it into a Blue Blaze trail and then kind of forgot about it, which is why I'm here right now, because hardly anybody ever hikes this little section of the trail anymore. But I'm not making this video to talk about the Long Trail. I am making this video to talk about the Appalachian Trail, specifically what they don't tell you about through hiking the Appalachian Trail. I'm actually not going to talk about the things that you legitimately have heard people say before. I'm not going to talk about the chafing or the bugs or being homesick, the Virginia blues, all that stuff. I'm going to tell you the story of the final day of my Appalachian Trail through hike and the exact moment that I got up to the sign on top of exact moment that I got up to the sign and finished the Appalachian Trail. So it's kind of weird to say, but it started out just like any other morning on my Appalachian Trail through hike. We just woke up at the Katahdin Stream campground, packed up our and just started to hike. One thing I remember thinking about a little bit was this whole like post-trail depression thing, because it was like my last day, I was about to be done. And honestly, I think post-trail depression is kind of bullshit. Now that's not to say that people don't struggle when they finally finish the trail and go back to real life and stuff, but do we really want to call it depression? Like, I know people who have legitimate depression and have struggled with it for years. I feel like most people when they finish their through hike, they don't actually, like, they're not actually depressed, you know? Like, you just finished a 5-month vacation and you're bummed out that it's over. Like, that's what it really is. I just think it's interesting how there's so much talk about post-trail depression out there on YouTube and on the blogs and all this stuff, and they always seem to focus on the immediate time period after you finish your through hike, after you get back. That transition from being a piece of hiker trash, just living it up out there, and then just being thrown back into the real world like, oh shit. But nobody really seems to ever talk about how the through hike affects you down the line. I'm talking months, even years after you finish the Appalachian Trail. And so as I started my climb up Katahdin, I'm thinking about all these things. I'm reflecting on the amazing hike, the amazing experience I just had. And I'm really thinking like, okay, like what's gonna happen after I'm done? Or I guess I kind of knew what was gonna happen. I was gonna go back home and start working and stuff, but more what am I going to feel after this is all done? But then I decided like, okay, I need to be present in the moment right now. I'm about to finish the Appalachian Trail. This is something I've been aspiring to do for a long time. Like, I really just need to soak this in. I really need to be present in this moment and just milk it for all it's worth. And so I started to think about the inspiration I had for hiking the trail in the first place, how I first discovered through hiking on YouTube back in like 2012. I was in high school. I really didn't have much else going on at the time. And somehow I got this crazy idea in my head as like a 15, 16-year-old, like, oh yeah, someday I'm totally gonna hike the whole Appalachian Trail, even though I literally knew not a goddamn thing about hiking. I thought about how I basically got that idea in my head and then spent the next, what is it, like 6 years basically, all throughout the rest of high school, all throughout 4 years of college, thinking about the Appalachian Trail and how someday I was going to go and hike from Springer Mountain all the way to Katahdin. It was always in the back of my head, and I was thinking about it every single time I went out for a hike. So I'm like reflecting on all this stuff, getting like super deep into my emotions, and I'm really just trying to force myself to like tap into some emotions that I just wasn't feeling. Like, I'm thinking about all this stuff. Like, this is such a surreal moment for me. This is a day that I'm never gonna forget. But for some reason on the climb up, I just didn't really feel that much. I don't know. And I don't even know like what exact emotions I was supposed to feel. I just remember thinking like, okay, Kyle, this is really weird. Like, I feel like you should be more like excited and emotional. You should just be feeling something that you're not feeling right now. This is weird, and I hope it doesn't ruin the moment. And so for the first half of the climb up Katahdin, I was like having this like struggle with myself. And the thing is, when you're hiking the AT, at least if you're like me anyways, every single day, I would think about finishing the trail. I would think about Mount Katahdin, and not in like a, oh, I wish this was over already, like I just want to get this over kind of way, but more just like a thinking about reaching your goal kind of way, and using that as motivation to keep yourself going. So eventually I made it to the part of the climb where you get above tree line. And at this point, I don't remember exactly how far, but I think you're maybe like 2-ish miles away from the summit of Katahdin, from the end of the Appalachian Trail. And I could almost like look up and like see the sign, you know, I could see the top, and I could see there's people going up there and stuff. I was like, holy shit, that's the end. And I still didn't feel anything. I thought like maybe once I can actually see the top and see the end, I'm gonna feel something. And no, I still didn't feel anything, and I only had a couple miles to go. So I start hiking above tree line, and I'm still not feeling anything. Like, what's going on? I can see myself getting closer to the top, and eventually I get to a point where I'm probably like, come on. And eventually I get to a point where I can literally like see the top. I'm probably a half mile away maybe. I can see like all the people, like, you know, their little stick figure looking people on the very top of the mountain. I'm like, that's it. That's the top of the mountain. That is the end of the Appalachian Trail. That is the end of the freaking hike that I've been doing for 4.5 months, for 140 days. And like, I'm trying to rationalize all this, but still it just felt like any other hike. I mean, a cool hike. There's like a nice view, and the trail is pretty technical and stuff like that, but it just didn't feel the way I thought it was supposed to feel to finish pretty much the biggest goal that you've ever set for yourself, and something you've been thinking about doing for years and years and years. And so I keep going, and eventually I'm like real close to the top. I'm like within a couple 100 yards maybe of the top, and now I'm like panicking. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, I was so like in my head, dude. Like, I can't stress this enough. You just spend so much time thinking about that moment that you finish. You spend so much time thinking about what it's gonna be like to climb Mount Katahdin and finish the trail that you've given so much blood, sweat, and tears to accomplish. And then I finally got like right next to the top of the mountain. And as I recall, you come up, and the famous like Mount Katahdin sign is like not facing you. It's kind of off to the side a little bit. It's not just like, oh, boom, it's done. The sign is kind of like facing like a different angle or something like that. And so like I'm walking up, and I like see the sign, and I'm like, I don't know, like and in hindsight, if I like wasn't in my head, like just thinking about this the whole hike, then I probably would have felt something more. But the thing that happened next probably wouldn't have happened either. So I go up to the sign, and I kind of like, you know, walk around so that I can actually face the front of it. And that's when I lost it. All of a sudden, all those emotions that I thought I was like not feeling, or I was like neglecting to feel or something like that, they all just came like rushing out and just freaking smacked me in the face all at once. Like, honestly, it's still like kind of crazy to talk about it. Like, it still chokes me up a little bit. And I'm not gonna lie, I cried like a little baby. As soon as I saw that sign, dude, just started crying. I was the first one out of my group that was up there. They weren't very far behind me, but for a few seconds, it was just me and then a bunch of random other day hikers who probably didn't care about what just happened to me. I gotta say, in that moment, like, it all it just hit me. It just hit me. It was surreal. And in that moment, I realized that genuinely, I am never going to be the same for the rest of my life. It's so like, it's like so cheesy. Like I know you're probably cringing with me right now, but it's true. And this kind of gets into what they don't tell you about finishing the Appalachian Trail. This is called Duck Brook Shelter, by the way. There's a video of me and some friends at this shelter back in like 2012 trying to kill mice in our underwear because they were all over the shelter.
It's right. Fucking kill it. I can't kill it with a fucking broom. Get it between I just saw another one. Are you fucking... Oh my... Alright. Are you fucking kidding me?
I don't really know what I'm saying here. All I know is that in that moment that I finished, I knew things were never gonna go quite back to the way they were before. And that's not to say that my life became like drastically different the moment I finished the Appalachian Trail. Eventually I went back, and sure, I had like post-trail depression or whatever for a while, mostly just because I was being a fat f***ing sat of my ass eating food without exercising for the first 2 months. And it's like eventually I kind of got over that, right? But things never really felt exactly the same, just as I kind of realized when I was up on Mount Katahdin when I finished. And I'd be curious to hear from folks who also have finished the Appalachian Trail or one of the other long through hikes, the PCT, something like that, if you have kind of felt the same way. And it's not even like a bad thing necessarily. I'm not saying like my life has been like all downhill from the moment I summited Katahdin. It's just kind of weird, like it's hard to describe, but maybe I guess it changes the way you look at life or your perspective or something really like deep and cringy like that. But that's not even like, I feel like I'm not that much of a different person now than I was when I finished the AT. It's like they tell you all about like the scenic spots on the trail, they tell you all about the gear you need, they tell you that you're probably gonna shit your pants at some point on your through hike. That never happened to me though. I came close though. I definitely came close. They don't really talk about what it's gonna be like, not just immediately after you finish the trail, but months and years down the road. This is getting way too deep for somebody with my level of intelligence and maturity to be talking about, so I'm gonna go back to my car. I'm going to get some dinner, and I'm going to drink a beer. Yeah. If you watched all the way through this video, thank you very much. The YouTube algorithm really likes it when people watch the entirety of your video. And if you watch the entirety of all these videos and you like my content, please join the crew of folks over at the Patreon, patreon.com/KyleHatesHiking. Shout out to everybody on there. I've been getting a few people to sign up each week. It's really, really cool to see. My channel's never gonna be the biggest channel in the world, but even if I only get a couple thousand views on each video, it's just really cool that there's a little community of people over there that dig my stuff. So thank you for watching. Thanks for considering Patreon. And fuck Dan Becker.